guys, today I have a super exciting video. This is a dupes video for the Naked 1, 2, and 3 palette. So basically I was given these 3 eyeshadow palettes. These are the Makeup Revolution Ionic palettes. They are the 1, 2, and 3, and they're pretty much exact dupes for the Naked palettes. While the Naked palettes all retail for about $52, these retail for $7. So basically, if you buy all 3 of these, that's not even half of the price of buying one of the Naked palettes. So that is pretty insane. I'm going to be doing some swatches and reviews on these palettes and telling you guys if it is worth it to buy these palettes over the Naked palettes. So before I begin, I would just like to say that I was given these Makeup Revolution palettes, and this is my honest opinions on these shadows. So I know that this video is probably going to be super long, so I'm just going to get right into it, beginning with the first Ionic palette and the first Naked palette. Okay, for starters, the Ionic palettes, they are all packaged the same way. They are just this like black outlining, I guess. It has the logo right here, and then it has the clear plastic so you guys can see inside what that colors actually look like. While the Naked palettes are all packaged differently. The first one is like a cardboardy, satiny, fabric-y texture, I don't know. And they all do have mirrors inside of them, while the Naked 2 and 3 palettes are both metal. Okay, so I'm going to be going color by color to explain to you guys the differences and the similarities between the eyeshadows. Also, if you guys didn't already know, the Naked palettes do come with a synthetic brush, while the Makeup Revolution palettes come with a little sponge applicator that most people just throw away. Okay, we're gonna start with the first color in the palette. In the Naked palette, it is called Virgin. There isn't too much of a difference between these two shadows. I'm sorry if I keep looking down. I'm looking at the palettes so I can see my opinion, and also if I'm looking over there, I have my computer with the swatches on it, so I can really give you guys an in-depth perspective on how I think of each of the shadows. The Naked palette color, I would say, is a bit more like white toned, while the Makeup Revolution one has more like yellowy or orangey tones to it. The Naked palette one is definitely a lot lighter, while the Makeup Revolution one is more dark. There's really not that much of a difference between the two, but the Makeup Revolution one definitely does have more orange tones to it. For the next shade, Sin, in the Naked palette, is probably one of my favorite colors in the Naked palette. There is a little bit of a difference. The formulation between the two is very similar, which I was very surprised with, but the Makeup Revolution shadow is a bit more pinky toned than the actual Naked palette one. The next shade, Naked, there really is not that much of a difference. The Makeup Revolution one is slightly more warmer toned than compared to the Naked palette one, but it is still a really good transition color. The next shade, Sidecar, is very similar. In the pan for both of them, it really does not look like the color that it does when it is swatched. It comes off a lot darker, and the Naked palette one is much darker, shimmery brown tones, while the other one is, I would say, a bit more cool toned from the Makeup Revolution palette. Is a bit more cool toned, while the other one has more like brown and warm tones to it. The next shade, Buck, in the pan they look a little bit different, but when swatched they basically look almost exactly identical. I would say that the Naked palette one maybe is a bit more pigmented, but not like crazy more pigmented. It's almost exactly the same. The next shade, Half Baked, is probably another one of my favorite colors in the Naked palette, and the difference between these two, I would say, is that the Makeup Revolution one, I would say, is a bit more of a true gold color. It has more yellowy tones to it, while the one in the Naked palette, I would say, is more like a bronzy gold shade. The next shade is Smog, and these colors are basically almost exactly the same. The one in the Naked palette is slightly more dark, but it doesn't have too much difference between it. The next shade is Dark Horse, and in the pan these two look quite different, I do have to say. But when swatched, the only other difference is that the Naked one is slightly more dark compared to the one in the Makeup Revolution palette. The next shade, Toasted, I would say that actually the one that has the most pigmentation for this color is actually the one in the Makeup Revolution palette. I think that it swatched a lot nicer than the one in the Naked palette. I found it to be a lot more buttery, and that's especially nice because it is a shimmery eyeshadow. It's more pigmented in the Makeup Revolution palette, and I would say that the color is a bit slightly more pink toned in the Makeup Revolution palette. The next shade, Hustle, the difference in the two palettes is When you look at this color in the Makeup Revolution palette, you just kind of think, what? Because it looks like a olivey green color. Here, let me show you guys. And this is the color in the Makeup Revolution palette. They look basically nothing alike in the two palettes. But when swatched, they actually do look quite similar. Besides the obvious difference that the one in the Makeup Revolution palette is slightly more olivey toned, I guess. And then the one in the Naked palette obviously has more of like the purpley pinky tones. The next shade, Creep, in the Naked palette, I was never too impressed with, not gonna lie, but the Makeup Revolution palette one is so much more pigmented. I was really happy that this was darker because I was never too impressed with this color from the Naked palette. So I'm super happy with this shade, and I think Makeup Revolution did an awesome job recreating this color because they made it more pigmented. And then the final color, which is Gunmetal. The one in the Naked palette is slightly more shimmery, while the other one is more satiny-esque, I guess. The one in the Makeup Revolution palette, I would say is like a true gunmetal toned color. I would say that the one in the Naked palette has more blue tones, so. Okay, so moving right along, I have the Ionic palette 2 and the Naked palette 2. Okay, so the first color that we have is the shade Foxy, which is kind of like an off-white color. It's like, it has some yellowy tones. And the one in the Naked palette, I would say, is a bit more buttery. The Naked palette's matte formulations I find are always really good. The one in the Naked palette has more yellowy tones, while the one in the Makeup Revolution palette has some more white tones, and it's kind of more of an off-white color as opposed to the yellowiness of the actual shade Foxy. The next shade, Half Baked, which is also in the Naked palette. Again, I would say that the one in the Makeup Revolution palette is more of a true gold. Talked about this color, so we don't need to talk about it again, but the next shade is Booty Call, and not gonna lie, I probably do prefer the one in the Naked palette. And this is definitely one of my favorite shades in the Naked 2 palette, so I kind of figured that it was gonna be hard to beat. The one in the Makeup Revolution palette, I would say, is way more shimmery, while the one in the Naked 2 palette is much more satiny. So, if that's a word, satiny. So I don't know, I thought that the one in the Makeup Revolution palette was a bit too sparkly for my liking. The next shade is called Chopper, and I always found this color kind of hard to work with in the Naked 2 palette, but when I swatched the one in the Makeup Revolution palette, I automatically fell in love. This is by far one of my favorite colors now in the Makeup Revolution palette. It is oh so pigmented. It is amazing. Like, with one single swatch, I already knew that I was falling in love with it. It's more of like a dark copper compared to the one in the Naked palette, and I prefer that actually. The next shade is Tease, which again, this is a matte shade, and the matte shades by Urban Decay are stunning. But yeah, the Makeup Revolution one is slightly less buttery, but it is very pigmented still. Okay, the next shade is called Snake Bite, and I love this color. Okay. I'm gonna probably end up saying I love this color for all of the colors because honestly I do. And the pigmentations are fairly the same. I would say that the one in the Naked 2 palette has more like bronzy tones to it, and I would say it's more of a darker bronze color, while the one in the Makeup Revolution palette I would say has kind of some gold undertones to it. Oh, also for the shade Snake Bite, again, they look so different in the pan. Where is it? There's the shade Snake Bite. Right there, please focus. There's the shade Snake Bite, and this is the one in the Makeup Revolution palette. As you can see, that's kind of the same weird olivey tones, so I don't know, they did swatch very similar though. The next shade is called Suspect, and I would say that this color is almost an exact dupe. The Makeup Revolution one is slightly more darker, the pigmentation is almost exactly the same, and they look almost exactly the same, almost an exact dupe. The next shade is called Pistol, and the one in the Naked palette is darker, but they have the same pigmentation to it. The next shade is Verb, and these two colors are again almost exactly the same. I would say that there's a bit more glitteriness, the one in the Naked palette compared to the one in the Makeup Revolution palette. Again, almost exactly the same though. Okay, sorry, my camera battery just died, so I just had to go get a replacement. The next shade is called YDK. These two are also very similar. I would say that there's slightly a bit more pinky purpley tones in the Naked palette, but the glitteriness is about the same, so they're very similar, just the color is slightly different. Not that much though. The next shade, Busted, the one in the Naked 2 palette is definitely a lot darker, a lot bolder, while the one in the Makeup Revolution palette, not as pigmented. Still a very nice color, but it's definitely not as pigmented and bold as the one in the Naked palette. And the final shade, Blackout, which is just a matte black shade. The one in the Naked palette has been one of my favorite just black eyeshadows of all time. And I was not expecting the Makeup Revolution one to be too much more pigmented, and I was kind of correct on that. It is, I would say it's pretty good pigmentation for an eyeshadow palette that costs this amount of money, but this one, the Naked 2 palette one, is so much more pigmented, but I don't know. Okay, so now we are on the final palette, which is the Naked 3 palette, and the Makeup Revolution eyeshadows from the Ionic 3 palette are currently what I'm wearing as today. So the first shade is Strange, and there really is not too much of a difference between these two. I would say that the one in the Naked 3 palette is slightly more white. It goes on more smoothly, I would say. The swatch definitely went on a lot more smoothly than the one in the Makeup Revolution palette, but they are very similar. The next shade is called Dust, and I am very happy with the pigmentation on the Makeup Revolution palette, because in the Naked 3 palette, nobody really liked this color at first because it basically is just a pure glitter, and it is so hard to apply without getting glitter running down your face. So the one in the Naked 3 palette has more pinky tones to it, while the one in the Makeup Revolution palette I would say is closer to the shade Sin from the Naked 1 palette. It has more champagne tones to it, and it's equally as glittery as Dust, but there just is so less fallout, if that made any sense. There's not as much fallout. So the next shade is called Burnout, and I really like this color in the Naked 3 palette, but when I swatched the dupe for it from the Makeup Revolution palette, I automatically fell in love with the one from the I can't even talk now. Automatically fell in love with the one from the Makeup Revolution palette because it is so much more pigmented. It has more coppery tones to it. It has more glitteriness to it. It's just more beautiful, I would say. The next shade is called Limit, and as I told you guys before, I really like the matte shades from the Naked palette, so this is another one of those matte shades. This is like a mauve toned crease color, I guess, and the one from the Makeup Revolution palette has more brown tones, and it's not as pigmented. Still pretty good, but I prefer the one from the Naked 3 palette. The next shade is called Buzz, and this color is literally so gorgeous from the Makeup Revolution palette. Again, it comes off more coppery and more glittery and just more amazingness. It's really gorgeous, this color in the Makeup Revolution palette. I am so happy with this color. The next shade is called Trick, and I think that from the Makeup Revolution palette, this is basically my favorite shade out of all of the Makeup Revolution eyeshadows so far that I've tried. This is another one that's kind of tricky, but this is another one from out of this palette that nobody really liked because it was hard to work with, tricky to work with. I already made that joke, it was already bad. Okay, let's move on. Because it was hard to work with, but the one in the Makeup Revolution palette is just like so gorgeous. It has more coppery tones, it's more bronzy, it's more glittery, it's more gorgeous. I think I've said all these eyeshadows are gorgeous, but whatever, I'm gonna roll with it. So yes, this is definitely my favorite shadow out of all the Makeup Revolution ones so far. The next shade is called Nooner, and I love this color in the Naked 3 palette. The one in the Makeup Revolution palette, the color is basically exactly the same, I would say, except for the pigmentation on the one in the Naked 3 palette is slightly more pigmented, I guess. They are very similar though. The next shade is called Liar, and these two are almost exact dupes. The one in the Makeup Revolution palette is slightly more coppery toned, while the one in the Naked 3 palette has more brown tones to it. But they are both super gorgeous, and they're almost exactly the same. Next shade is called Factory, and again, what I keep finding is that the one in the Makeup Revolution palette, more bronzy, has more gold tones, while the one in the Naked 3 palette has more of the brown and chocolatey tones to it, I guess. And the one in the Naked 3 palette is slightly more pigmented. Okay, so the next shade is called Mugshot. I would say that these two are basically almost exactly the same. The one from the Naked 3 palette has more of like the brown chocolatey tones to it, but basically the pigmentation I would say is almost exactly the same. The one in the Naked 3 palette though, I would say has more of a shine and glitter to it. The next shade is called Dark Side. I would say that the Makeup Revolution one is slightly more pigmented. It's a little bit lighter, but it's more pigmented. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but whatever. And then the final shade, Blackheart. I would say that Makeup Revolution really did make it true to what it was in the pan. I would say that the one in the Naked palette comes off as more of like a black. Well, in the pan it kind of looks like a almost purpley color with red little glitter flexes in it. The one in the Naked 3 palette really just looks like it comes off as a black with red glitter flexes in it. Well, I was expecting it to be like more of a purpley toned color. And then the one in the Makeup Revolution palette basically comes off exactly how I was expecting it to come off in the Naked 3 palette. I don't know if that made any sense, but it makes sense in my head. So those are all of these shades. I hope that my comparisons made sense. Overall, I think that if you had to choose between buying one of the Naked palettes or one of the Makeup Revolution palettes, I would personally buy one of the Makeup Revolution palettes because you're gonna save so much more money. And even if you buy all 3 of them, that is not even the cost of one Naked palette, so good deal. So yeah, if you guys did enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe for more, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!